Assignment 5 is an exploration of different types of balances, and we're focusing on asymmetry and symmetry. And so what you're going to create is, first of all, an asymmetric design. So in order to do this, it would be a really good idea to look at mid-century modern design, graphic design, architecture, to understand balance by virtue of weight, position, and direction. And from that asymmetric design, you're going to derive a symmetric design. And they're going to be related. Using a collage technique to cut shapes from printed material that can be direct mail, it can be magazines, it can be product packaging, it can be your cereal box, whatever you have lying around. Brochures, wrapping paper, scrapbook paper, anything that is actually printed that'll give you color variety. And then you'll be using one color of gouache, and that color is up to you. And as you can see in this example, the color of gouache was actually taken from the colors within the printed material. So the gouache is up in here, and then the printed material is here. So you are working with one chromatic color in gouache, and you can use black and white as well. So you can mix the black and white to gray. You can mix the gray into the chromatic color. You can mix white into the chromatic color. You can mix black into the chromatic color. So you can tint, shade, and tone that chromatic color to get a wide variety of color options. We're keeping it to one gouache color just for simplicity's sake. Human beings require balance. We do not like to be unbalanced. In addition to physical balance, there is visual balance, and we require stability in our visual field as well. And visual balance is one way to help unify a design. So the problem specifically, you're going to use gouache and found materials to create spatial explorations that flatten and increase the illusion of layered space in related designs that contrast asymmetry with symmetry. So one design is going to flatten space. The other increases the idea of layered space, layered depth, planar recession. So you can see that things are kind of complex. You have to apply your critical thinking skills to think through this problem. So in the top we have the asymmetry, in the bottom we have the symmetry, derived from the asymmetry. So you're going to start with the asymmetry. So you're going to develop 3 to 4 concepts at half scale using pencil. Now certainly you can explore more than 3 or 4. Let's say 3 is the minimum required number of concepts. Develop these at half scale. So your final scale is 6 by 8. So you're developing these concepts at about 3 by 4 inches. And of course you can develop them using pencil, pen, or marker. And you should use small bits of printed material, do it on grid paper, graph paper, and create an asymmetric design. Now, where a lot of people run into trouble is they don't really understand the asymmetry. So asymmetry is balanced by virtue of position, weight, and direction. It is balance, it is not unbalance. You do need to define an axis that will run pretty much edge to edge, whether it's top edge to bottom edge, whether it runs vertically, horizontally, diagonally, whether it runs side to side. However you want to do that. Again, study mid-century modern, study Swiss or international style design. Select the concept that you believe best solves the problem, not the one you like best, but the one that you believe that best solves the problem, and refine it at full scale. Do it on Bristol, do it with pencil. So what we're looking at here's a variety of concepts that were explored by a student. And we can see some of these are more successful. This is not really working. This has potential. This is the one they went with. It has a sort of a diagonal axis. Actually, this is the one that probably worked the best. So these are the concepts, and they explored more than 3. Here's another set of concepts from a different student. Definitely working with kind of the same idea. They wanted to use kind of pencil and geometry and things like that. And they're looking at a diagonal axis So then you're going to trace the full scale drawing. So you've done the drawing on Bristol, then you're going to trace it. So you're going to lay over a piece of trace and tape it down and trace the frame and trace the what's inside the frame. So here's a work in progress. And so we see that underneath the trace, we've got the white Bristol. By the way, don't cut the design space out of the Bristol until you finish the design. It just makes it easier to deal with. So the tracing paper is laid over the design. So what you're going to do is you're going to trace just half of the design. So either this half or this half. So figure out where the midpoint is that bisects the left from the right. Draw a line and trace whichever half you prefer. And then you're going to fold the tracing paper and trace the half that you traced onto the other half of the tracing paper. So you basically have bilateral symmetry, and you can see what was done here. This half is here and it's reflected here. So this half was traced, and then the tracing paper was folded along the axis, and then this was traced onto this half, and then it was unfolded. So we see the fold line here, and we see an exact replica mirror image on this side of this. So at that point, you have your asymmetry and your symmetry. The symmetry has to directly come from the asymmetry. So then you're going to use gouache, one chromatic color, black, white, mix your grays, or if you want to buy gray gouache, you can. And found materials, and found materials is anything that already exists. And as I said, it can be packaging, it can be magazines, it can be brochures, it can be things that come in junk mail. So you're going to apply the color and the found materials by cutting, collaging, and you have the background for cutting shapes from assignment 2. You're going to apply color to one design to flatten it. You also did that in assignment 2. So we're kind of reaching back to what we've done previously in order to accomplish what we're doing now. Try to flatten everything so that there is no figure ground separation. Try to create one visual plane wherever everything is sort of competing on the front line of the design. A way to do this is to reduce the amount of value contrast and also eliminate the figure ground separation by how you distribute color. Remember that you've already done this. Now we're leveling up, we're taking it a step higher. So here we see from a student's journal the effort to create a flatness. So it's coming into a single plane fairly easily. The gouache is the large gray area, and there's a lot of blue and toned blue and tinted blue and shaded blue in and among the various bits and pieces. So we see the found material here. You can see how that's cut out. So you see basically how this is coming together in progress. So you're going to do the same thing using gouache and the same chromatic color and your found materials to expand the space into layered visual planes. So foreground, middle ground, and background. So here you want to increase the value contrast and the perception of figure ground separation. Then you're going to trim both designs from the Bristol and cement them to gray board or heavy gray paper. You're going to photograph them or scan them and upload them. So this is basically the layout. The top is the asymmetry and the bottom is the symmetry. And you can see the shape right here is this shape. So this was cut right in half, and this is the half that was traced here and then reflected. Asymmetry here. Very lively, lots of energy here, flat space, a little more figure ground separation here. We have more foreground plane with the chromatic colors, middle ground with the grays and the tones, and then the background tends to be the black. But you can see that this took this, traced it, and then reflected it. Another one, a little more architectural in feel, the asymmetry here. There's the axis. And trying to balance against that axis by virtue of position and weight and direction. And then taking this half and tracing it, reflecting it, and then applying the color and the found materials. So this has a little more sense of flatness, this has a little more sense of layering. The red is in back, the blue is in front. This one we saw in the opening slide. Asymmetry, the axis is this direction, and then this is the half that was initially traced and then reflected. Here you have to have a direct bilateral symmetry where there is the same distance from the edge to the axis in the center as the distance from the axis in the center to the right edge. With asymmetry, you do not want your axis to run bilaterally. You do not want the axis to directly bisect the space in half. So there's a tip. Because if you do that mathematically, logically, you're setting up for symmetry. I would say work out your designs very carefully on grid paper. Work out your ideas. It might help if you, again, look at Swiss and international style. They're basically the same thing. Look at mid-century modern so that you understand the idea of position, weight, and direction to balance. Asymmetry is one of the hardest concepts for people to grasp, and a lot of people believe that asymmetry is not balance, but it actually is balance. It's a very dynamic, energetic type of balance. It's much more visually interesting than symmetry. Symmetry is static and stable and has a direct correlation to geometry. Asymmetry is dynamic. So let's see what you make of this.